So for those people who aren't sure or haven't had anything to do with me previously, my name's Dave Atkins. I came up for a year in 2007 and I'm still here. So I quite like going on camp programs. That's the main reason why I'm here. I'm a little bit allergic to classrooms, so I try to spend as much time as possible outside. I would like to acknowledge the local custodians of this land, the Aranda people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging for the ability to be able to live, work and teach on country. So come on in, guys, as we get moving. All right, as I mentioned before, we're here for Year 7 Discovery, and that is a little bit confusing now that Year 8s are doing their own discovery learning. However, Year 7 got this naming rights first before the whole discovery thing came out, so it's a bit confusing, but the Year 8s go on a Year 8 adventure. The Year 7s are discovering, and the discovery aspect, I suppose, is it's about an introduction into what we do on camps programs within the at St. Philip's College, what it looks like, and it's not too full on. We're not sort of carrying heavy packs, we're not sort of doing large group cooking, there aren't any fire sort of breathing ceremonies or walking on hot coals or any of those sorts of things. So that's sort of for later on down in the programs, or maybe on the adult program, which some of you might like to participate in. So tonight we'll have a bit of a look at why we're here, the outdoor program as in 7 through to 12, and an overview of what discovery for Year 7s look like. There's a little movie which sort of gives us a little bit of an idea as to what an experience on Year 7 may be. Some of you might have watched that. We'll have a look at Sun, which is effectively basically some guidelines around how to operate for our young people on camp, respecting ourselves, others, and nature or the environment, how it all works, what we have to do, and then some actions that might be required. Year 7 as a cohort, there's a lot of you, there's a lot of camps, and generally I think probably 90% of people without this info session have already signed their children over to us to come on camp. So well done to you guys and for filling out the paperwork. So some of them, that might be news to some of your sons and daughters, but we will proceed. Why are we doing this? So plus étendu, there is more in every individual. There is more in you than you believe. So we are trying to expand and build. Some people have been on extensive camps. Some people have practically lived on camp for years out at Ormiston or other places around in the territory. Some people have never been on a camp. Some people have come from schools that have had significant camps. And so we're trying to all get into a position where we're setting ourselves up for our best opportunities. Obviously, if we sort of miss out, and the camps program at St. Philip's College is quite a progression. If we miss out on steps in that progression without experiences externally, we can find ourselves that it might get a little bit scary, and we'll talk about some of those as we go. So it is an important part of the curriculum. There is a very important aspect where you can actually build on relationships. And that sort of term was coined by Mr. Chris Tudor. And a relationship is that relationship between a staff person at St. Philip's College and the students. It's the relationship that they can foster. If all you are doing is teaching maths or geography or history or English, you will just have people for 55 minutes or an hour and your relationship doesn't necessarily blossom. If you go on camp for days and days, 24/7, you find out little bits of information while you're walking, you find out things like favourite movies, you know who has some trouble with reflux, you know who has loose bowel movements and can't do anything without digging a hole, or can't use the toilet first thing in the morning, so stop about 2 kilometres into the walk and have to dig a hole through bedrock in the NT, which is quite problematic because everyone's got their little systems and quirks. So that's really important. And the relationships come back to the college. So it's a start and a foundation. And 2 weeks of class time is intimately affected by us going on camp in Year 7. So we want to make sure that we're sapping the most out of that. Often some things will get in the way, so a Stedford will probably suddenly pop up because their dates might not be locked in and you might not know when you're playing trombone or recorder or dancing or any of that sort of stuff yet, but that will probably be like, parents will be like, oh yeah, Stedford, like yes, they're not planning as far ahead as this, so maybe we need to have some of those considerations and check our own personal calendars, because there are 3 sets of dates, so I'd like to think that we can get your sons and daughters onto one of them with a little bit of advance notice and warning. It is important to experience failure, and failure isn't necessarily like, it doesn't usually include death, but for example, if we get to the abseil and we don't think that we want to abseil and we can't actually get to the point where we can abseil, then that will be supported. There is definitely a reasonably strong persuasive voice at the top of the abseil, possibly with something that resembles a little bit of firm pressure as we're sort of encouraging people to put their weight into their harness, lean back and try to trust all of those ropes on those loose Centralian rocks that they might be having a little bit of a think about. Not everyone necessarily goes down, and for people that like, the challenge might be just getting on that abseil. For other people, it's like, oh, this is so easy. Well, let's try something else. We might end up upside down accidentally. We might be in a sort of something that resembles a starfish. We might roll over and sort of pretend that we're a parenti lizard or something and start crawling down. So, but not everybody has to do that. And there isn't an expectation. Any staff members that come, there's obviously an added pressure on those staff members to raise the bar. So, you know, gappy students and the likes, like Billy, he'll have a strong expectation to possibly be upside down on the abseil, whether he's comfortable with that or not. And the students will probably make sure that he knows that there is some pressure as well. It does often get staff members onto an abseil who have never abseiled before, so it's very good to have that relationship building and a little bit of pressure both ways. Discovery, like effectively we want to break out of some of those comfort zones, and for some people where it's going to be comfy. Camping is comfy. For families that go camping a lot, it's going to be a relatively comfortable space. But for groups that go camping often, the challenge might be that actually we're sharing space. We're actually all under this shared tarp together instead of in my own swag, choosing my own patch of the great sky. So instead, you know, I guess we're a little bit closer together. We know who ends up drooling on their pillows. We know who flops around. Someone will probably get a black eye from one of those students that sort of flops around all night while they're sort of dealing with their sleeping bags and that sort of stuff. There are some very complex moves in sleeping bags, and it does take years of perfection to be able to keep your sleeping bag facing up so that all the warmth and the extra thickness is on top instead of rolling over and sort of being face down. And there's a very complex rolling procedure that involves holding it in that shape on your mat, and it will take decades, but St. Philip's is going a long way to sorting that out. We want to work within the confines of where everybody's up to, and some people will know may or may not be able to ride a bike out to the desert park from the college. In the PE classes, there will be a couple of weeks at the end of this term where there'll be some bike riding. So there will be a little bit of a rolling start there. So we'll have a bit of a heads up as to who may or may not need a little bit of extra work. We did have to work a staff member through riding a bike a few years ago, and I firmly remember her taking off at the roundabout and promptly smashing straight into it. And I probably underestimated. She was very enthusiastic. She probably didn't divulge that she'd never been on a bike without training wheels when she took off at the roundabout and didn't know where the brakes were. So we try and structure all of that stuff in, and I do start with riding inside the stadium. It is quite common for students to grab a little bit much front brake, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally, and that does grab reasonably well inside the stadium if you are goofing around, just as a warning. Some of our nationally ranked BMX riders have ended up face first into the netball courts within the stadium, goofing around during those riding sessions. So very capable, but having a front brake can be dangerous if it's on the wrong side of your bike. So be mindful, have a go. There might be some mental challenges associated with digging a hole in the bush. Luckily on Year 7, a mobile hole will be provided in some situations, or a hole will be provided that is in the confines of a national park's toileting facility with a seat and things like that. Once we get into Year 8, there are less seats available and more holes that students dig. So potentially, if you are doing the midday run while you're on a walk or something like that with your small plastic shovel, you may find out that there are some limitations with those small shovels. It does provide us with some spaces for students that may not otherwise get the opportunity to flourish. And some students will actually strive and seek to be super involved, and they'll be stepping up within that space. And it's not always the ones that are doing well academically, but hopefully it's another avenue for providing a space for people to really foster a love of being in the outdoors and to try new things. All right. Well, that thing in the background was like the round square ideals, which are sort of dotted around. We've got adventure, leadership, service, international understanding, democracy, and the environment, of which we cover a couple in there. So adventure being the most important pillar. That's why it's the first one that we can all see over there. And then obviously the environment's very important when we're undertaking our adventures. So we've got two of them closely located on the pillars around this hall, letting us know. So our outdoor program is very big. It's actually so big it doesn't even all fit on this screen at the moment, so I probably should have changed my monitor view. We're in that top section at the moment, Year 7 Discovery. We're out there for 3 days and 2 nights. So hopefully people have a little bit of an idea about that, including orienteering and abseiling, a bit of hiking, spending lots of time with our peers, some mountain biking. We do go by the desert park as well. After that, in Year 8, it steps up to 5 days and 4 nights. So some students might look at that and go, that's twice as long, that's twice as many nights. But we'll just work with it adding a couple of days rather than a couple of nights. So Endeavour steps up again, up to 9 days, which can be pretty amazingly full on for some people to think about right now. Just imagine my son or daughter leaving me for those 9 days. What am I possibly going to do with all that time on my hands? Some people will be high-fiving at the point where we get to that Year 9 Endeavour, go, woo! There will be different reactions for everybody. Some people will miss their sons and daughters, some people may not. Year 10, we have been offering Mittagundee now for more than 20 years. So lots of people have been to Mittagundee. This year we'll probably be taking down about 90 students will go down to Mittagundee. So there'll actually be 2 massive waves of somewhere between 44 and 48 students at a time. So the logistics around getting 52 airfares at a time does sort of get pretty complex. Anyway, that's a very big bill later on for organisational processes. In Year 11, we do have one that can be recognised by the Northern Territory, I think I've just mucked that up, but NTCE, Northern Territory Curriculum of Education. So it can be counted towards effectively a whole semester. So you can actually get 10 credits for going on a 10-day camp. That's 1 credit per day. If you have to sit in maths for a whole semester, that's 2 terms of maths at about 3 to 4 periods a week. So that can be quite a bonus if you are looking for some extra credits and things like that. The focus of that Year 11 Aspire program is leadership, self-reflection, communication, and the environment. And while you're out there on Year 11, they do some pretty amazing things. So it does include a 48-hour solo students are out there and they have some reflective time for 48 hours. Usually they're doing those ones for about 36 of those hours, and then at about lunchtime on the second day of solo, they sort of wake up and get a little bit antsy and start doing some of the reflection that they were supposed to do for the last day and a half. We also have a significant abseil, which is abseils into the top of Hugh Gorge, and it's sort of a little bit of an abseil with a twist. It's a little bit more like a canyon and a canyoning experience, although we don't go over that abseil if there's large amounts of water going down at the same time. But we abseil down, so we'd be wearing thermals and life jackets and wetsuits, possibly rain jackets, woolen jumpers, maybe gloves and socks on our hands if we needed to because it was freezing cold, double beanies, helmets. It's pretty bizarre walking through the desert with a lilo and then abseiling into a deep dark hole just on sunrise into a large body of water, and then your backpacks come tumbling down in a controlled sense, tumbling down in a group of 3 while they're attached to a rope. And they join you down in the deep dark hole while your son or daughter is sort of just about passing out from blowing up the lilo, getting ready to go into that freezing cold water and trying to balance the pack on top of their lilo. And then they do that through one sort of 70-metre pool, and then they get out and they sort of get, it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then they get in another one and another one and another one and another one. And they slowly get colder and colder and colder until they get to the coldest place on Earth. And then, sometimes white fluffy stuff might fall from the sky in that location. It can be so cold. So we've got lots to look forward to in our program. There's even stage 2 outdoor education would be offered to year 11 students. So potentially if you were thinking about outdoor education as a career, you could potentially go and do a degree in outdoor education. And that is a thing, a degree in campology, tarpology, any ology that relates to cookology, on fires, all of those sorts of things. So that can be quite a fun one, and we actually have a number of students that come back who have gone through a higher education tertiary degree, and they come back, and we've got one student or ex-student, I think he must have finished in 2015, but he'll be back and he'll be on the year 9 and year 11 programs this year. So there's a good relationship, or there's quite a high percentage of students that come out of St. Philip's and then, because of their adventurous journeys, end up in an outdoor education profession. So we often have 1 or 2 undertaking that at a tertiary level each year, which is very exciting. Down the bottom there's year 12 advancement, and advance does tend to be a little bit of a different focus. Advance goes back down to 3 days. The focus is around spending time with your peers, spending time with your senior staff and heads of house, and really focusing in and making sure that we can pull our finger out and identify the things that are going to help us with finishing off year 12 to the highest standard that we can get to. So it's more of a retreat style program out at Ross River. There are showers, there's catering, or whole year level en masse. It's not a small group sort of experience. It's a less intimate experience, but it does a different purpose to focus in at the end of term 2 before we go into that second half of year 12. So lots of things to look forward to. On Discovery, we mentioned it's 3 days away. There are actually 6 different groups. So there are 2 at a time. So one group effectively starts at one end and one group starts at the other end, and they sort of cross over in the middle. There's hiking. The hiking is between Simpsons Gap and Wallaby Gap. So it's approximately 10 kilometres of walking. So students would have the whole day to go 10 kilometres. So an average student, I suppose, while walking and stopping and doing the toileting and eating scroggin and having lunch and throwing rocks and coming back onto the path and all those sorts of things, average student can walk at about the pace they walk around the college. And they will probably get there in about 5 hours of walking. If they walk a little bit faster, year 7s are usually really keen, and the group sort of concertinas a little bit like a sort of large caterpillar, because there'll be a group that are sort of running and you'll know who you are, and there'll be a group that are sort of, oh my God, I'm going to catch up, I'm going to catch up. Oh, it's so hard, it's so hard, I'm going to catch out there managing it, and luckily we'll have some gappies, so Billy will be all over that while he's out there. There's some mountain biking. The mountain biking is on mountain bikes. It's not necessarily mountain biking in the sense that it's single track and about 20 centimetres wide, negotiating large boulders. It is riding a mountain bike. They do ride out to the desert park, which is all on bike paths, obviously dodging traffic in a variety of ways, usually en masse and walking across intersections. But they ride out to the desert park, and then there is a small section of four-wheel drive track. So it's not death-defying, white-knuckle, downhill racing mountain biking. So if we can ride on the footpath, we'll probably survive this one. There could be a couple of little offshoots. There is definitely some opportunities where kids that are sort of feeling like they're on one wheel most of the way might be able to break off and do a couple of little extensions around a couple of areas as they go. We're obviously camping. Year 7 is pretty good because we actually camp in the same spot for 2 days. So we don't actually have to move. So we're not yet sort of starting our journey-based program where we have to pack up every day. And all of the Year 7s are going to get a brand new sleeping bag that is sort of rated to -5, which is going to come home, and parents are going to help look after that and make sure that it comes back each year. So it's an industrial rated One Planet, which is an Australian company, and it is a significant sleeping bag investment, or it'll come with like its own little look after me bag and things like that. You air it out. You don't have to dry clean it, but we don't have to dry clean them either. So school was basically issuing sleeping bags, dry cleaning them, issuing them, dry cleaning them repeatedly, and now it's going to be better in the long run if students look after their own sleeping bag really well, and then you have it to go on other trips and things like that. However, there is a love-hate relationship with sleeping bags, and I'm not sure how many people have practiced putting sleeping bags back into its little case that it comes in. It's almost like someone has sort of vacuum sealed all of the air out of it before it goes in there, so there will be some trouble getting that back in. So in Year 7 it will come back and it will be in there when it comes home with a name on it and all that sort of stuff, but probably good to have a practice before going on Year 8 again, and maybe even take it out of there so it's not living its life in a compressed, held up little space. Like hang it up in one of the cupboards when it gets home, or in a pillowcase or something up in the top of one of your cupboards. They can be dry cleaned. There are also washing instructions and things like that on them. One thing that can be quite good if you have like an inner sheet, there are various types of inner sheets, and it is an optional item, but it can add a few degrees of warmth. So if you have an inner sheet, particularly if it's warmer and people are sort of unzipping their sleeping bags, and you know, sometimes there are some ants or a couple of mozzies and stuff like that, it's like, oh, it's too hot for my sleeping bag, I need something else. So if you have an inner sheet, then that can be over you, and the bonus is that is much easier to wash when it gets home as well. So if you have access to one of those, or you're looking for some early birthday presents or something along those lines, it could be a bit of a keeper. So I'll be making my children use their inner sheets all the time to reduce dry cleaning of sleeping bags and unnecessary washing. The good thing about the inner sheets, by the time a student gets into Year 9, all of that stench that comes out of their stinky feet from walking in the same shoes day in, day out, is probably stuck in the inner sheet rather than the sleeping bag as well. So the inner sheet comes out, gets washed, and then the sleeping bag sort of gets aired, and then you can put that away. So we got a bit distracted in there. There's some abseiling. So it is definitely one of the things that our students probably either have a love or hate relationship with at the college. The Year 7 abseil is not outrageously large. I guess it would be equivalent to coming out of the sort of gangplanks up there. You're probably abseiling sort of in that 6 to 8 metres vicinity. And it's relatively short, it's reasonably easy. It does still have some challenges like getting onto a rope and trusting harnesses and things like that, which isn't necessarily natural. I know my mental space usually just says, why would I want to leave this perfectly good cliff that I'm standing on? I'm standing like nothing can go wrong. When we're abseiling though, the Year 7 abseil is like one of those little key steps If you sort of miss and you manage to dodge out of the Year 7 abseil, and then you sort of like dodge out of outdoor ed elective and you don't sort of get on the climbing wall for a couple of years, and then you sort of like duck and weave after you've been over the razorback on Year 9 and you've still managed to not have an abseil, they sort of get progressively larger. By the time you get onto Year 11, we'll be having a hostage negotiation sort of scenario where we're trying to have a practice abseil in the weeks leading up to Year 11, so you've had a practice before you get there, because it can end up getting to a point where staff need to be trained and equipped to be able to literally just clip onto your child and start walking off the cliff in Year 11. So if we can abseil in these first feeding ones where we're kind of doing small things, we build up to bigger things later on. And hopefully we don't get to that sort of drag someone kicking and screaming off a cliff, because it's part of our journey. There's a little bit of, there's the desert park. We sort of get into the nocturnal house. Hopefully most groups will get exposed to the birds of prey. It depends whether they're doing an AM or PM at the desert park. Obviously camping, this is a camping trip effectively. There are not any showers. There are toilets with walls and a seat though, which is a bit of a bonus at this point. And students might be involved in the chef groups or some of the cooking. So the chef groups, they'll probably be exposed to cooking, hygiene, environment and fire, and that system will stay in place as we go through all of our outdoor programs. So hopefully we get a little bit of a taste for it. Let's have a look at what Year 7 might look like.
I've been looking over my shoulder at the past too long. The tide is running, and I walk the hungry mile as a man in my prime. The tide is running. I've always been a fighter, held my own in a brawl. There ain't no use in fighting when what you know is gone. Oh, I'm pig iron from the freighters, lone wolf from the holes. The tide is running. I fought the bulls at the gates for every hour the man could spare. The tide was running. Children in the lanes hold their hunger to their chests. Watch the men walking home.
Lots of Wallaby Gap action there, which is pretty good. I love that. Sorry about that. Small technical hitches. We talked about SUN very briefly. SUN is really just an acronym to help us remember self, others, and nature, or the environment. And I guess there's this large notion that students, if they can answer, am I respecting myself in the action that I'm doing? Am I respecting other people, or am I respecting the environment? And if we can answer no to any of those, it's probably a good idea to just check that it's going to be okay. And it's like, oh, I'm just contemplating jumping up and down on this widgety bush until it's flat. It's like, self, yeah, that's all right. I'll get some credit for that. Others, oh, everyone will think it's sick. Oh, environment, possibly not very respectful to the environment. So probably if we can work with that, we can sort of get away with most things. We obviously still have the college rules in place, and we're only out there for a short time, but we try to work on that notion that if students are respecting themselves, by making sure that food's going in, food's coming out, water's going in, water's coming out, sunscreen's going on, we're protected from the environment if it's hot, we're protected from the environment if it's raining, all of those sorts of things. We're getting our sleep, we're letting everyone else get their sleep. If we can look after ourselves and respect ourselves and our own personal equipment, we're more capable to be able to help look after other people while we're out there and respect other people, and the fact that they're going through a very similar thing, all sharing the same experience. And unfortunately, the environment is always the last one, because we have to be able to respect ourselves and other people before we can respect and engage with that environment. But it's obviously very important for us to protect it and maintain it as close to what it was when we went into it. So most of you have already been activated and you're in there, and you know when your son or daughter is already going. Those are the dates. They're out there and floating around on Operoo, so we shouldn't, hopefully you don't have to look too much further. There's also an opportunity for adults to get involved, not necessarily on Year 7. The bonus about going on a Year 9 or an adult endeavour is that your child might go away for 3 days, and then later on, a couple of months later, you might decide to just go out for 5 days and have your own experience with your peers as well out in the outdoors, and you get a bit of a taste. I guess it's a highlight of Year 9. So the Year 9s is a 9-day experience. The adults program on offer is 5 days, and it sort of fits around when our Year 9 program is operating out there, but you'll be exposed to the low ropes course, you'll be exposed to freezing cold water going through Fringilly Gorge, you'll be exposed to climbing up onto the Razorback and experiencing dehydrated meals that the students have prepared in Year 9. They prepare somewhere in the vicinity of 750 dehydrated meals a year through home ec in Year 9, and then that gets consumed on outdoor programs, which is a lot of meals really, but it adds up pretty quickly if you take lots of kids out on camp. And then coming down off the Razorback through Birthday Gap, you might get to choose to abseil or not, depending on how effectively as a group you walk over the Razorback. You might be experiencing some roast chicken in a camp oven, and then it's time to go and get out of there. So if you're interested in that, definitely speak to Emma or myself this afternoon, or email outdoor.education. So that is on in July, which is the start of term 3. If you are thinking about your logistics and whether you can escape, just be mindful that you will have had 4 weeks of your son or daughter at home being responsible for them, so you might need a little break by the time they go back to school. The other thing that's on this weekend, St. Philip's sponsored 3 hours of power. Now, I'm noticing that not many people in this room have done the last 3 hours of power, which have been on Saturday nights to build up for this event. So you have the opportunity to just do it all at once. So you just rip it off like a Band-Aid, come and ride a mountain bike in total darkness for 3 hours with your son or daughter around in circles for 3 hours. That's on this weekend. It's free for juniors, and obviously it's at the Telegraph station, 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. The bonus is that although there are options for 6-hour and 12-hour teams, they're all going to be riding at the same time, and it might be a late night, but it won't be finishing at 7 a.m. the next morning, which is usually what happens with our 12-hour events. So if you're interested in that, get in. It's usually a fun night. You'll probably be yelled at by many. Lots of people will be riding around on a circuit of about 5 kilometres. You don't have to ride for that full 3 hours. You can stop and have a drink in between at the Telegraph station if you would like. So what do we need to do from here? Attend the information night. Big tick for you guys. Everybody else is going to be sent a link to this recording and have to watch me at home on a small screen. And my head will disappear out of sight repeatedly, for instance. Check your emails from Operoo. Sometimes, like maybe Operoo disappears into this thing called junk mail or spam because it'll be harassing you every 3 days at the moment until it gets a response. So what will happen is sort of like every 3 days it will be prompted and it will send an automatically generated email. So it's really good because I don't have to do that. And then probably next week sometime it will change its mind and it will come down to an email every day until you action stuff from Operoo. It's really good. It's reduced a lot of my stress and difficult conversations by harassing you very effectively. So once you do what it's asking for, I guess, and give it a response, it will stop harassing you. Record the dates, get the information and the equipment list, those sorts of things. So hopefully medical info is up to date. As Year 7 parents, you're pretty organised and that's well and truly been done already recently. We've got representation. Sam's here from the Med Centre. If you've got any issues with Operoo or anything like that, she could probably field all those conversations right now. So just joking, Sam's just been put on the spot awkwardly. Talk to me or Emma. Questions? Yeah. When is the actual date? Well, it's in week 5 and 6 of term 2. So they're in May. So we're on the slideshow, which will be coming out very shortly, and you'll be able to check Schoolbox and go to outdoor education and then outdoor programs and look at Year 7 Discovery if you need to access that, because Mum and Dad have probably just put you on camp and you're ready to go. Yeah, Charlie. What? Sorry? Oh, well, there's a whole bunch of things in bucket lunch. Like, I think that you've got a qualified